Hey, welcome to Draft Academy. My name's Mike. In this tutorial, I want to talk to you guys about reading from external files in Python. Now, a lot of times in Python, you're going to want to read from files that are outside of your Python file. So you might want to read information from like a text file or a CSV file or like an HTML file. And you can actually use something called the Python read command, and it will allow you to read a file that is stored outside of your Python file. So you can use these files to get information, or you can parse through different files and do different things. So I'm going to show you guys the basics of reading files, opening files, closing files, doing all of that stuff. Over here, I have this file called employees.txt. And it basically just lists out a bunch of different employees. Like these could be employees in an office or whatever. So it's just listing out all of this information. So let's say that inside of my app.python file, I wanted to read the employees inside of that file. The first thing I have to do is actually open that file from inside Python. So I can use a special command called open. So I can say open. And then in here, I can type in the name of the file that I want to open. So this is either going to be a relative path to the file, an absolute path to the file, or just the file's name if both files are in the same directory. So in my case, app.python and employees.txt are in the same folder, like they're in the same directory. So I can just type out the name of the file. I can just say employees.txt. And then I want to put one more thing inside of this open function, and it's going to be the mode that I want to open the file in. So you can actually open files in a couple different modes, and the first mode is called read. So I can just put an R here, and that's going to stand for read. And this basically means that I only want to read the information inside the file. I don't want to modify it. I don't want to change it. I just want to read it. I just want to see what's in the file and do some stuff with that information. Another mode is called write, so I can type in this W. And writing basically means that you can change the file, right? You can write new information, you can change existing information. There's another one called A, and A stands for append. And this basically means that you can append information onto the end of the file. So you can't modify any of the information in the file, you can't change any of the information, but you can add new information. And there's one more, which is R+. And this basically means read and write. So this will give you all the power of reading and writing. So in our case, we're just going to be working with regular R. So we're going to be reading from the file. Now this open function will essentially just open the file. So it's going to like go over to that file inside of our file system, open it up, and it'll allow us to read through it. But generally, we're going to want to store this opened file inside of a variable. So I can create a variable and we can just call it employee file. And I'm just going to set it equal to this open function. So now the open employees.txt file and all the content inside of it is stored inside of this employee file variable. Now, whenever you open a file, you always want to make sure that you close the file as well. So just like we have this open command, we also have an close function. So I can come down here and say employee file dot close. And this is essentially just going to close the file, so we're no longer going to be able to access it. And generally, it's a good idea whenever you're opening up a file, you want to also make sure that you're closing the file at some point. So generally, once you're done reading it, you can just close it. So that's kind of like how we can open and close a file. Now, let's talk about how we can get information from the file, right? There's no point in having the file there if we can't figure out what's in it. So there's actually a few different functions that we can use on this employee file to figure out what's inside of it. And I'm going to show you guys some of those. So I'm just going to make a print statement, and inside this print statement, we'll basically just print out some information about the employee file. So the most basic thing we can print out is just the entire contents of the file. But before I do that, I want to show you guys how you can check to make sure that a file is readable. So before we do anything else, generally it's a good idea to make sure that it's possible to read this file. And there's a function inside of Python we can use called readable. So I'm just going to type out employee file dot readable. And this is going to return a Boolean value, and it's going to tell us whether or not we can read from this file. So I'm going to run my program, and you'll see down here we get a value of true. And that's because we set the file with a read mode. So it's in read mode, we can read from it. If I was to put a W here, so if I put like write, now readable is gonna be false because we can no longer read the file, we can only write to the file. So I'm going to change this back to R so we can just read it. So once you figure out whether or not the file can be read from, let's actually read it. So there's another function called employeefile.read, and this is basically just gonna spit out all the information in the file. So when I run the program, it's just gonna spit out all of this information, right? All the information that was in that file. I can also come down here and we could read an individual line inside this file. So I can say employeefile.read line. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna read an individual line inside of this file. So now when I run this program, you'll see it's just reading that first line in the file. And this read line function is actually just reading the first line, and then it's basically like moving a little cursor onto the next line. So if I was to copy this line of code and then print it again down here, I'm saying employeefile.readLine, so it's gonna read the first line, and then when I say it again, it's gonna read the line after that. So this is actually gonna end up printing out the first 2 lines in the file. So when I run this program, you'll see we print out Jim Salesman and Dwight Salesman. So if I was to do this multiple times, like I could technically print out every line inside of this file. And you can see we can do that. And so that can be pretty useful for reading multiple lines in a file, but there's actually another function that is better at doing that. And we can say, instead of employeefile.readLine, we can say .readLines. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna take all of the lines inside of our file and put them inside of an array. And so now when I print this out, you'll see we have this array down here. It says Jim Salesman, that's the first item in the array. Dwight Salesman, the second item in the array. It's basically taking each line and putting it inside of an array. So if I wanted to access a specific line, I can just refer to it by its index in the array. So if I said 1, now this is gonna give us that Dwight Salesman line because that is at index position 1 inside of the array. You can also use this read lines function with a for loop. So I could come up here and create a for loop. I'm just gonna say for, and we'll say employee in employee file, and then for each employee we just want to print them out. So, and actually sorry, we have to put employee file dot read lines up here. And so now this will loop through all of the employees in this employee file dot read lines array, so we can actually just print out the individual employee. And now this will print out all the employees inside of that file. So it's basically printing out each line in the file, and that can be pretty useful. So you can use all of these different functions like read, read line, read lines, readable. You know, there's a bunch of these different things that we can do to get information from a file. And so there's a lot of cases where you're gonna wanna be able to parse through information in a file, and this is an awesome way to do it. So just to recap, whenever you want to open a file and read from it, you can just use this open function, type in the name of the file and then the mode, which in our case is gonna be R. Then you can do all sorts of stuff with it, and you always want to make sure that you close it when you're done. That's just good practice. So that's the basics of reading from files, and hopefully you guys can use this in some way, shape, or form in the future. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to Draft Academy to be the first to know when we release new content. Also, we're always looking to improve, so if you have any constructive criticism or questions or anything, leave a comment below. Finally, if you're enjoying Draft Academy and you want to help us grow, head over to draftacademy.com/contribute and invest in our future.